welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team. I'm Yetta Decker, and today I'm here with Thomas, and he is an appraiser, and he's going to answer all kinds of questions that folks have asked us over the years about appraisal. So welcome, Thomas.
Well, thank you.
Nice to have you here back.
Good to be here.
He's been here for another show, so if you want to watch that, you can go into our archives and find it there. And we've covered different topics in both of them. Yeah, we don't say the same thing, do we?
No.
No, that's no fun.
That's good though.
No, it is good because there's so much to know.
There is. Yeah, it's you know, when you're looking at your biggest investment, it's you really want to make sure you do your homework, and being an appraiser, it allows us to do that, right? Right,
to protect. I mean, is that your primary function, really?
Well, every appraiser has a scope of work that they have to do, and that's the responsibility of whoever their client is, whether it's a private appraisal or whether it's for a lender.
Right.
And so when you're working for people, you want to make sure that you're following what you said you would do for them, right?
Right.
And so we have guidelines that we have to follow, and it's what we discussed previous.
Yeah.
The lenders do tell us what we have to do and how to do it.
And they vary from lender to lender.
And that's right, they do.
Perfect.
And we talked about a little bit about the private sales that are now happening a lot more on the market, and how the lenders are protecting themselves by sending out more and more appraisers.
Right, even though on most of the private sales, there's a realtor on the one end.
That's true.
On the buying end,
true.
And yet because it wasn't listed or marketed through real estate, that's still increasing the risk to the lender.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So now a building inspector. I mean, they're obviously not an appraiser. However, how would your role as an appraiser differ from that of a building inspector? Because they're there to protect the buyer as well.
Absolutely. Now, we're there to protect the asset, you know, the lender.
Really?
Really, because you're looking at the buyer, you know, the home inspector is there for the buyer.
Solely.
Period.
Well, aren't they kind of there for the lender, or for the lender as well, because of the building inspection doesn't go well, and there's some structural issues, then the value that might be in the home isn't in the home?
Right, but the lender doesn't order the home inspection.
No, the homeowner does.
That's up to the homeowner.
Ah, okay.
And the homeowner pays for that.
Yes, they do.
Okay, so the lender benefits from a home inspection.
Okay.
If the home inspector does find something that red flags it.
Right,
then
an
they're protected
appraiser
on the sidewalk.
probably saw, except does an appraiser go into the attic?
No. So what an appraiser's role is to go into the home to give that visual inspection that they can't see from the office, wherever the lender is or whoever is insuring the mortgage.
Right.
Okay. It gets the appraiser out in the field, and it just gives them that sense of that someone's had a look at the property. And so when we come in, and it sidetracks a lot of people because they expected us to be there an hour. Some of the lenders are actually, well, you're in and out in 20 minutes. How's that possible? And basically what our role is to go and have a look at your home. We do an exterior inspection, but what that is a visual inspection. And we're following the scope of the work that we've been given, and what that means is that, okay, we're there to show the lender that there's no adverse influences on the property, that there's no visual...
So let's go back for a second. Sure. Adverse.
Yeah,
so what would that mean to somebody listening here? Yeah.
If you front onto Maryville Road, that's an adverse influence.
Okay, what if you have hydro wires in your backyard?
That's an adverse influence.
What
it depends on the size of those hydro wires. Some of the big ones in Orleans, you see some of those large towers.
Right.
You know, and a lot of people like that. A lot of people say, well,
because
I don't
you get
have
the green space.
Yeah, I get the green space. I don't have anybody behind me. That's awesome. And like I said, that's a street value, what I call a street value. It's good for you, but it may not be good for the next people who come along to try to buy your house.
Or backing onto a plaza.
Again.
And do you vary, does the value that you put on those adverse conditions, does that vary depending on where the property is? I mean, if you're downtown Ottawa, backing a plaza would not really be adverse, it would be normal. If I was in
it depends.
Greeley, it's a big deal.
Yeah, well, yes and no. You know, there's several different kinds of negative influences on the property.
Okay.
It's up to the appraiser to judge then how that negative influence compares to the comparables that they've chosen in order to put the report together.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so it's not so much where the property is located, and because, you know, right now we're dealing with huge growth in Barrhaven, Orleans, Hope Side Road out in Canada, and you actually have realtors saying no rear neighbors.
No.
Yes.
When there's going to be
Yeah.
development?
Well, this is it. This is why I laugh.
That's a little scary.
You know, it's that whole concept that says, okay, well, you have no rear neighbors now.
Yeah, and in about 2 weeks.
But about,
well, or
maybe 2 years,
yeah.
you will have rear neighbors. It's the same thing that happened in Stonebridge.
Yeah.
And I think we all know about what happened with Monarch.
Yeah.
Had a bunch of homes backing onto the apple orchard.
Yep.
They sold those homes with premium. I'm assuming they had, as an appraiser, you walk in there, oh, they back onto the apple orchard. It's nice. It's beautiful.
You're paying a little more for the lot.
You probably
We're going to
paid
appraise
a
it
little
higher,
bit more.
and it will appraise higher.
Well, it would if it was backing onto green
Right,
space,
right.
right? Because you don't have that negative influence of people back to
Right,
back and that kind
exactly.
of stuff. And now the apple orchard is gone.
There's not a tree left.
Nothing.
I was so sad. I mean, I knew it was happening. We had the
Yeah.
last year it was open, we actually picked apples
Right,
there.
right.
And then
Yeah.
drove
So
by, and they haven't even kept an apple tree.
No, they didn't keep anything.
Nothing.
No. And so now you have all those homeowners who used to back onto a beautiful orchard will now back onto homes.
Right.
So it just depends. It depends on, that's the appraiser's role, is to say, okay, this is what's happening in the area, and this is what we need to be aware of.
And
that
do
kind
you
of thing.
actually do a zoning check then as part
We
of the
do.
appraisal process?
We do. And it's a small component. Most appraisers will stay within their area.
Okay, so then
Like,
they
I
can't
won't
get
go
surprised.
to Brockville.
Okay.
I won't go to Brockville. I won't go to, I won't go anywhere out of my area that I'm not just appraising real estate in, but to be socially aware of what's happening in the city. It's up to the appraiser to know if there's been massive layoffs. If it's up to the appraiser to know if a plan is closed, if there's
Okay.
new development happening, if someone's just signed a contract to bring in a huge firm, and you know what I mean, like the military is relocating, and
Or we
from
think so.
or we think so, out to Canada. These are things that appraisers should be aware of in their surroundings, right? And that helps them identify when it comes to like comparable properties.
Right, so are you doing just based on history, or are you doing, because that sounds a little bit like you're doing future intent of the area as well. You're looking at what the value will be when that development does go in.
Yeah,
So-
when we appraise a house, we have to identify what the highest and best use of the property is.
Right.
So if you're an appraiser and you're looking at a property, as an example, that's surrounded by industry and it's just been overgrown by industry and it's still a R1 zone and maybe grandfathered into a commercial zone now, maybe the highest best use is not a single family home anymore.
Okay.
Maybe it is, to tear it down and make a business out of it.
Right.
So these are things that you're always aware of when you're checking. Like, we have access to the City of Ottawa, like everybody does. You have access to your own property on the City of Ottawa website.
Yeah.
It gives you all your specs. It gives you your zoning. It gives you what the zoning is for that area. So we can check. We can check to see what the neighborhood's doing. We can see if it's growing, if it's changing, if it's in transition. We're seeing a lot of transition now in the Hintonburg Mechanicsville area,
yeah.
which used to be an older, run-down, high rental area. Well, Westboro and the Glebe are running out of space, and West Centertown, so now that area is starting to turn, right? People are starting to pay
which we
higher
knew it
prices.
would, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it
So
just gives you an idea.
Right.
Someone who comes into our area from another city would never know that.
No. And do you
And-
actually
and
take
they're-
that into consideration when you're doing the appraisal?
What, that the area is in transition?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We take into
Okay.
the idea that we actually have it on our forms that the area is in transition. It's in a
Okay.
positive, and we reflect on that in our comments to say, this area is now turning around, and there's growth, there's new development. It's particularly even in Westboro.
Right.
We've seen what happened in Westboro.
Well,
right?
exactly.
Uniform Homes comes in, they buy a whole city block, they tear all the homes down, and all of a sudden they're putting up these mega homes. So we need to be aware of that stuff.
And does that affect the value of the home?
Well, any kind of new development is going to be positive rather than old, worn down
Okay,
homes, right?
okay.
So if you have new development happening and new life coming into your neighborhood, it's obviously for our benefit.
So if you're doing an appraisal and you're using your comparables, generally 3 comparables, I think is what
Yeah,
you would use.
generally that's what we use.
Right?
Yeah.
if we're in an area where it's just at the beginning of the transition and all we have is comparables that really didn't take into consideration the transition because the new development hadn't come in yet, it's just coming in, how would you show that in an appraisal?
You don't really get into that kind of stuff
Okay.
until there's supporting data.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no supporting data, then you can't just make stuff up, right?
You
gotta,
even if you know that
everything
you know that you know.
does not matter. You need the
Okay.
supporting data in order to put down on paper what you're trying to get across.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah.
So in relation to the interior of homes, I think that's what people generally focus on.
Sure, yeah.
How much value is put on the interior versus the exterior? How does all that
Well,
fit together?
That's not really the kind of question. It
Okay.
should be, I always get the idea, what's the quickest way to increase the value of my home?
Okay.
And the quickest way is always, like everybody says, improve your kitchens, your washrooms, your flooring.
Right.
That's the quickest way that you can get a big bang for your buck.
Okay.
And if you can do it on your own, there's a lot of handy people out there that you can.
There's a lot of handy people out there that shouldn't be handy people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've run across those too.
Yes, I bet you have.
Yeah,
you gotta go, oh no, please hire a home renovator.
Yeah. We do run across the home renovation projects where you're doing the improvement or whatever they want to do. Value-wise, though, we do like to see the newer kitchens. We like to see the hardwood floors. We like to see the updated. When you're updating, you're increasing value.
Right.
You always got to. Now, that's a big difference, though, from maintaining.
Okay.
So when we talk about exterior,
right.
As an example, if an appraiser comes to your house and we just spent thousands of dollars, which you do on a roof.
Like
Perfect
10,000 easy.
Easy, right? And on the bigger homes, it gets up there,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Depending on what you put on it and that kind of stuff. So, there's several ways to look at that because your life expectancy of that roof was 25 years, but generally we're getting 15 to 20 tops out of our shingles, and so actually what you're doing is maintaining the home.
Okay.
Right. Granted, it's a brand new roof.
Shingles.
And there is
not
value
necessarily
to
brand
that.
new roof, right? Because they didn't necessarily replace the sheathing. It's the
that's right.
shingles.
Yeah, there's new
okay.
shingles to the roof,
Right.
or there's new vinyl siding, or there's new things that they've done, windows and that kind of stuff. It does increase the integrity of the home and does give a little bit of value, but you're not going to get the full pop of what you just spent, right? Because
not from an appraisal perspective.
No, because if you just put 10 grand out on the roof, if you didn't do it, you'd have a leaking roof.
Yeah.
And obviously there's more cost to that, right?
And that's not good.
That's not good either.
No. Okay.
No.
So what about things like landscaping?
Yeah, so we get this question a lot. We really do, because a lot of people are like, they want that backyard oasis. They want to have time
and they've
for
spent
their
50,000 or 100,000. I've seen it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Often.
And it you know what, it adds up really fast, especially with stonework and that kind of stuff. There is value into the higher end, stuff that they put out. In-ground pools, a perfect example. I just spent 50 grand on an in-ground pool, so therefore the value of my home's gone up 50 grand. No. Unfortunately not.
No.
And if you look at it from a lender's perspective, and this is how you can sort of talk about it, is if you have a pool and you don't maintain that pool, what's the life expectancy of the pool?
Right.
Generally, it's going to be 2 to 3 years. You're going to have, liner issues. You're going to have motor issues, heater issues, those kind of things. When a bank loans money on a mortgage, they're not going to take into account generally
Your toys.
something that is going to fall apart and rot away in 3 to 5 years if you don't look after it.
So really what they're looking at is the hard asset.
Absolutely. Because they have to, right? Like if you don't look after your home, it's still going to have a life expectancy longer than your mortgage.
Yeah,
5 years.
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
If you don't look after it, if you don't wash the windows.
Even if you don't do caulking and you don't repaint the windows, you're still good for 20 years. I mean, even if you did nothing.
Right. So when that is taken into account, that's what the banks look at. They like that hard kind of thing. The Oasis is wonderful for your families. It will provide value, and appraisers do give value on the nicer properties. The in-ground pools for sure, there is some value. you're not going to get the 50 grand that, you know what I mean? It's not a one-off. I guess
No,
that's
it might be more like a
thing.
tenth or.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And I don't think everybody thinks of that when they're doing the work and the improvements.
No, and like you have to look at it. This is for you. This is what your family wants at this time. But as a realtor that as soon as you put that pool in, you've actually limited the ability to sell the property.
Potentially, there's some people
There
that
are
don't
some
want
people
it.
that don't want a pool.
Absolutely, and so you have to target
That's
those
right.
people
that want a pool.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so then you can get a little premium.
Yeah.
And yet you're right,
Sure.
it doesn't appraise out a whole lot higher.
That's right. That's right.
And depending on where the pool is put in, if it was put in a small backyard,
Yeah.
it in fact could devalue the property.
That's right.
Could have cost you $40,000 or $50,000 or in excess of that, and in fact you've made your home worth less.
And that's why we try to say, if you're going to do stuff to your home, then do it so that you're happy.
Yes.
And that it's something that you're doing. It's same as basements. And we use basements as a prime example as well. We all know on a 2,700 square foot home, you can spend up to $50,000 on a basement.
Easy.
Easy. And make it what you want it to be, because you're not going to get the full value of that basement.
No.
Basements flood. And that's
They
reality.
do.
Yeah, absolutely, they do. And there's a little bit of liability there, right?
Right.
And so that's how they look at things as well.
Okay.
It's you're always looking at, okay, if we're going to live here for a certain amount of years, what's going to make us happy here, and then if we're going to move on, then we need to make sure that we didn't devalue the price of the home.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're joining us right now, we're on the inside track on real estate with the Decker team, and we're talking to an appraiser, Thomas, and he has been answering lots of really great questions on this show as well as another show. If you want to listen to any of that, go on back and listen to it. And we're going to talk a little bit now on MPAC. We covered that in a casual way on the first show, and now we're going to go a little bit deeper. If I have an MPAC appraisal and I look at it and I go, that clearly is not what the value of my home is. It's more than I can possibly imagine I could sell my home for based on what the neighboring properties have sold for.
Sure.
What recourse do I have? Can I call you?
Well, no, you can't call me.
I can't.
You can.
It won't help
I'm not
much.
going to help you.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So who does that appraiser if I
yes.
need to have it reassessed?
So, in the previous session that we talked about the mass appraisal that MPAC generally does.
Right.
MPAC does have their own appraising. They have their own appraisals who are on site. And
they'll go into houses.
And they will go out to the property.
And that's who you get?
And that's who you would get. You probably get an MPAC appraiser come to the home who's, I'm not sure their education or their certifications. I'm sure there's some of them that are certified. I don't work with them, so I don't know.
Right.
And then, they go through the process of the reassessment with you on a one-on-one basis.
Okay.
You can't, as far as I know, you can't hire your own appraiser to make an appeal to MPAC.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's good for everybody that's listening and watching to know, is that if you're not happy with your MPAC appraisal, you're actually going to have an MPAC appraiser do your appraisal.
But the good thing is that they're coming to your house.
Right. It's an on-site.
Like what we talked about.
So there is value.
There is value. Absolutely, there's value. They'll have to do the same kind of things that we do.
Right.
In identifying what your property is, the condition of the property, the square footage of the property, the lot size.
Right.
And they'll go through all the tangibles with you, and then you can make your appeal with them.
Right.
And they will go back and then
right. So it is an improvement. However, I think a lot of our folks that are watching kind of thought, I can go hire my appraiser and I can get somebody that's completely unbiased.
You can hire an appraiser to give you your own appraisal.
Yes.
It's not that you can't do that.
Right.
It's whether MPAC would take into consideration the findings of that appraiser.
Right.
When they have their own appraisers on site,
Right.
whose role is to come out and work with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So some interesting information.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now, can they check out some of that information on the website? I guess they could go to the
Well,
MPAC
I know
website.
MPAC has a fantastic website
They do.
It's easily accessible. I've been doing it with some of my courses, and
Okay.
it's easy to walk through.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about things like additions? How do those factor into appraisals?
Well, square feet is money.
Okay.
Okay, so above grade square footage matters. And it's
So when you say above grade
Yeah.
square footage,
Yeah.
that's an interesting conversation
for sure. Yeah,
because we have
absolutely.
walkout basements
Yes.
and we have sort of half in the ground, so most
That's
of the
right.
space downstairs is
Yeah.
above grade.
Yeah.
How does all that value factor?
Sure. Well, let's talk about first the addition, right? So
Okay.
if you're looking at an addition and it's in a backside addition, 2-story, 1-story, and it's above the ground, that's all new square footage.
Okay, and does
As
that
long
get
as
the
it's-
same value
Well,
as
as long
the
as it's
original square
finished,
footage?
yes, it does, because it's finished square feet, so it's
Okay.
included in the overall square footage of the home.
Okay.
When you start to get into the walkout basements, whether they're finished, unfinished, there's a lot of tangibles there, because in Greeley particularly,
Yes.
there's a lot of rolling hills and rolling lots where a quarter of the home is above the grade and then the other half is actually underground, and so it's up to the appraiser to make sure that they have their measuring tapes and that they're out there and they're seeing what is above grade that's finished,
Okay.
and what's below grade, and then when you have a walkout that's not finished, there is value into the walkout itself.
Right.
Yeah, so it's up
It's
to the appraiser.
confusing.
It is confusing because the appraiser has to then be diligent into what they're taking into account, and they should be having their square footages, their measurement tapes out there, and really just seeing where the grade of the ground is.
And if I have a basement space in a case of Greeley, I guess that's a great example where we have the rolling hills and we've got a fair bit of space. That at grade space, although it's at grade, is the basement.
Right.
Does that count the same as if my house were 50% larger on the main level? From an appraisal perspective?
Well, no, a basement is a basement, and there's a value based on a finished basement.
Okay.
And then square footage is based on a dollar value per square foot.
Of the whole
Of
footprint.
the whole, yeah, absolutely. So if you're putting more square footage upstairs and doing additions upstairs,
Yeah.
that's going to give you more value than the standard
Okay.
finished basement.
And even a walkout wouldn't give
Well,
you
it'd give you a
quite
little
the
bit more,
same-
but it still wouldn't
It
give you
won't
the
give you the same.
Well, it would, because if you're doing a walkout, it's above grade living space, right?
Right.
So if you're taking into account it's new square footage,
Right.
let's put it this way, any kind of new square footage to the home that's above grade
Right.
is the same. Whether
Okay.
it's at the back of the house on a walkout
Okay.
or whether it's on the
Okay.
second floor as an addition.
Okay.
Right.
And what about an actual house then? I'm building a new house and I'm building a bungalow that has a basement that's below grade and I have one next door where it's above grade. Does that house value twice as much? Or
What, the
how does-
basement?
Yeah,
Well, it's going to be bigger because the square footage is more.
right. Well, the square footage is the same. It's just some of it's at grade, some of
Well,
it's below grade.
Right, but if it's above grade, it's taken
Yeah.
into account.
Okay. So it actually goes higher.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what about a bungalow versus two-story? How do those sort of appraise out as your experience?
What do you mean?
In terms of value, would an 1,800 square foot two-story appraise similar to an 1,800 square
Well,
foot bungalow?
See, now we're getting into a very gray area
Okay.
because, and I'll use this as an example, Stonebridge is a perfect
Right.
example for that. You have a golf course community, you have two large two-story homes, and you have large bungalows. The Mahogany, as an
Right.
example from Monarch, has 2 bedrooms and a full washroom and a loft on the second level. So you
Right.
might as well call it a two-story home.
Right.
But they still classify it as a bungalow.
Bungalow with a loft.
Right. But they're in the 700s. Like some of
Right.
them are asking $700,000 for those homes. So the bungalows themselves are, depends on where you are.
Right.
Depends on the home itself. I wouldn't say that the 2 stories or the bungalows, in Greeley, it's a lot of bungalows. There's a lot of bungalow sales in Greeley. And they're in this anywhere from 5 all the way up to the 8s.
Yeah,
8s
even
and 9s. If
beyond,
you're on
yeah.
water,
Yeah.
and then you're up into the 9s, right?
On one of the ponds.
Yeah.
That's a whole conversation independent,
that's a
right?
whole, yeah, that's a whole different one.
Anything from an appraisal perspective that you would want everybody that's watching and listening to know? What do they need to think about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is if you are, if you are approached by an appraiser who is representing the buyer or the seller, don't panic. It's the biggest thing. That they are trained professionals, and that we do, like I said, we do have an extensive education system that we have to follow, and the experience that we take to the table. and not to worry so much about that.
Because the value is the value, really.
Yeah, like
Within a small
our
margin.
role is to get the market value of the home at the date of the inspection.
Right. Wow, it's been awesome, Tom.
Yeah.
That's so good. Thank you.
Thanks, Yetta.
And we're just going to talk a little bit about a property that has just come onto the market. It is in Canada. Actually, this one's in Finley Creek. How can I
this
dare
is
do
Finley
that?
Creek, yeah.
This is Finley Creek. That just tells you how many properties we have throughout the city, and they're all in various locations. This is a great little townhouse. It is a center unit, beautiful medium to dark hardwood floor, so very trendy. It's listed at $339,900. And one of the neat features with this property is they did some significant custom renovations actually when they built it. And what they chose to do was take out the second floor laundry room. They were concerned about leaking and that kind of thing. Even with the trays, it's just a little more concerning. And they enlarged the size of the second bedroom and made for a larger walk-in closet.
Great.
So kind of utilized the space differently, as well as they made a large main bathroom or one bathroom upstairs with ensuite privileges. So you get the gorgeous soaker tub, you get beautiful stand-up shower rather than two little bathrooms. And so most of the others in that area would have two small bathrooms. So this one's a little bit unique, beautifully suited to a couple that really want more spacious rooms
Right.
and not all the crammed little spaces.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're interested in that, give us a call. It does have a finished basement as well, single car garage as well as a paved driveway, and it's just outside or inside Finley Creek area at $339,900 and reasonably new. It's very recently built, so it's also got the nice crisp feel still. That would appraise good, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. There's lots going on in Finley Creek.
There certainly is lots
Yeah.
of new construction
Yeah,
there
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for joining us on the Inside Track on real estate today. If you're interested about this property or any other properties, or you have appraisal questions, I can get your questions hopefully answered by Thomas and or an independent appraiser as well. There are some appraisers that will do work for individuals rather than just institutions.
That's right.
And you work primarily for institutions
That's
at this point.
That's right.
It's a little less confusing and a little less variables, I guess.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. If you have questions or you'd like us to air something on chri.ca, or if you want to watch us on deckerteam.com, please do that, and we'll have it all over the place. Hopefully you can find us on YouTube and that kind of thing as well. So if you have questions, send them to deckerteam@chri.ca, and if you want to be a guest, then also connect with us. Thanks for joining us today.